You're listening to Engaging Early Learners. I'm Rachel Glassman, special education teacher and resource creator. This podcast is your go-to for classroom strategies and teaching support that you can actually use. Whether you're on your way to work or heading home, I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. It's a little hard to believe, but we are about 1 week away from the end of the school year. For myself, I know a lot of you are already out. We go all the way until June 25th. Now, since it's like 1 week away from the end of the school year, I do this every year, but I find myself like really reflecting a lot on what this year looked like, what I want to carry into next year. And I talked about this a little bit when I spoke about packing up your classroom. I think it's really important when we are closing out one school year to look back and reflect, what do we want to bring or leave behind for the next school year? Because I think as much as the kids are learning, we're also learning a lot too about our teaching practice or just anything, teaching in general. So it's really important to reflect. So I've been reflecting. So I want to share a little bit with you. If you are newer here, this was my first full year teaching in a K2 ERI classroom. ERI stands for Emotional Regulation Impairment, and I wanted to take a little bit of time to share what that actually looks like in practice, not just what you've seen on paper or what you've heard about, but in my day-to-day reality of my classroom with my students and in my school setting, what that looks like to kind of help you better understand me as a teacher and what I'm about to say as far as my reflection on the school year. So today I'm going to walk you through what an ERI classroom looks like in my experience, what our daily structure tends to look like, and then spend some time reflecting on the bigger lessons this year has reinforced for me. And just to ground this a little bit, every ERI program is different. Every district runs things a little bit differently. Every group of students obviously brings their own unique needs and strengths. So everything I'm sharing is very much rooted in my classroom, my students, and my experience this year. And while I wouldn't say that this year introduced a ton of like brand new concepts for me, it definitely did something just as meaningful, which is it brought back a lot of the things that I already believed about teaching, that I believed about behavior, relationships, special education, and it brought it all into a sharper focus because I had to use all of those things that I'm used to using, but it just reinforced it. And you'll kind of understand what I mean as I get more into it. So what is ERI? So I get asked this a lot. ERI stands for Emotional Regulation Impairment. In my classroom, that means that I am supporting students who benefit from much more intentional, consistent instruction surrounded around emotional regulation, coping strategies, social interactions, being flexible, their overall behavior and complying, and navigating the demands of a school environment in a way that feels safe and successful for them. And one of the most important things to understand right away is that there is no single ERI profile. We have tried to write up like what ERI should look like and the type of student that should be placed in ERI, but that is very difficult. And I will tell you, each one of my students is extremely, extremely unique. The students in my classroom are all very, very different from one another. They each bring their own strengths, their own personalities, their own interests, their own academic levels, and their own areas of need. The thread that does connect them, though, is not who they are, but what they need. So they all need a more structured, supportive environment where emotional regulation and social emotional learning aren't just an extra piece of the day, but they are something that is intentionally embedded throughout the entire day. And everything is done with a lot of intention surrounded with all of those things, including social skills too. And I think that that is an important shift in perspective because in my classroom, ERI is separate from just academics. It's not something that happens instead of learning. It's what makes the learning accessible for my students. My students cannot access the learning until they have all those other things. So yes, we are still teaching reading, writing, math, science, social studies, phonics, all of the things. But we're also constantly weaving in friendship skills, problem solving, independence, and regulation strategies that allow my students to engage with those academics in a meaningful way. And somehow, some way, it's all happening at the same time, all of the time. And I will include with all of those academics, we do include social skills instruction every single day. And that was by choice. So, one of the things that I love most about my classroom is how deeply individualized it is. And this is something I missed about the self-contained world. And if you followed along with me on Instagram for a while and followed along with my story, my journey, I really wanted to get back to the self-contained world within the past 2 years. So to be able to be back in that makes my teaching heart super, super happy. So again, it is extremely, extremely individualized. You're going to see, if you walk into my classroom, you're going to see visual supports everywhere, visual schedules, choice boards, consistent routines that are displayed everywhere. On each student's desk, there's individualized visuals. There's also visuals for the whole class displayed everywhere. Every routine has its own visual when we're teaching it, especially the beginning of the year. There's sensory tools available. We have a Zen Den. There's flexible seating options. There's that designated regulation space, whether it is the Zen Den or other spaces that we have designated with our students that they have access to throughout the school day so that they can reset and rejoin the group. I talk a lot to my students about resetting and rejoining because it's okay if you need a reset, but make sure you reset so that you can rejoin because we do have those things that we need to get to. But beyond just the physical setup, so much of what we do is centered around helping my students build awareness of themselves. We start every single morning with a regulation check-in, and every time my students walk in the door, they do that regulation check-in. And it's a simple sign outside the door, and they just point to it. So it shows different colors, and I have this in my free resource library. It's also on my Instagram page, but I can link it down below so that you could see it. It is color-coded, and they check in before they even enter the classroom. There's a big stop sign, and they need to check in before they enter. Are you regulated and ready to join us? And before they even have a chance to think about academics or think about the next demand that's coming for them, they learn to understand that they need to check in with themselves and make sure that they're ready for that task or for that demand. And before I even think about academics, I also want to understand how my students are functioning throughout their day and what they need. So as I get to know my students, especially in my type of classroom, I get to really individualize, does this student need movement? Do they need more connection? Do they need more one-on-one time? Do they benefit from more quiet time? Do they need more reminders or more strategies? So many different things that I get to kind of dig deeper on with each of my students because of the type of classroom I'm in. And it's so, so important to do so because of the type of classroom I'm in. I will not get anywhere with demands or academics if I don't understand those things about my students first. And one of the biggest reminders this year for myself has been that regulation is not something that you do later or worry about later. It's the foundation that everything else is built on, not instead of learning, but in service of learning so that they can learn. When students feel safe, supported, and regulated, everything opens up academically in a completely different way, and our students are more available. So this might honestly be the most personal realization I've had all year, and I didn't fully realize how much I missed being in a self-contained classroom until I was back in one. My heart is so much happier being in a setting where I can individualize my instruction and what I'm doing with each one of my kids to meet their needs. That is my favorite part of being a teacher. I've talked about this on here. I think when I talked about kind of like my teaching journey, when I taught preschool special education, I really got used to that. I was able to do what all of my kids needed and really meet their needs individually. I did not need to worry about an academic calendar or meeting certain assessment criteria. I really got to just meet their needs. And I missed that so much when I was in my second and third grade classrooms where I had to follow curriculum guides and all of those things. And I knew that they were not what was best for my students. So for the past several years, I've worked in those settings where they were a little bit more structured around the pacing guides, timelines, and external expectations from whoever about how quickly curriculum should move. And while, of course, there is definitely value in structure, and I definitely liked, having a list of what we needed to do, This year felt just different and a more grounding way for me. For the first time in about 5 years, I felt like I could truly teach the students that were sitting in front of me. If something needed to be slowed down, we slowed it down. If students needed movement, we built that in without hesitation. If a moment came up that required us to completely pause everything and work through that, social emotional situation, then we had the space and the time and the ability to do so. If a student needed something taught in a completely different way, there was room to make that shift without it feeling like we were falling behind or we were doing something wrong. And that kind of flexibility changes everything. And I know a lot of you listening do not have that flexibility. I completely, completely understand and empathize with you. But being a special educator and really being able to meet those kids' individual needs, there's just something about it. And it reminded me of something that I've always known, but I really felt this year, that in special education, in this amazing career that I have, that a lot of us have, the most important work that we do, that we are lucky enough to do, is meeting students exactly where they are, not where a pacing guide says that they should be. And then we build from there. This year reinforced something that I also don't think I will ever stop coming back to, but that relationships really are the foundation to everything that happens in our classroom. And I know we hear this all the time: build relationships, build relationships, build relationships. Because we know that before a student is willing to take on an academic task, there has to be trust. Before they can accept any sort of correction, support, there has to be trust. Before they can work through hard moments and come back from them, there has to be that trust. And that trust isn't built in like big dramatic moments, especially in a tough moment. It's built in consistency, someone showing up for them, showing that they care. Think about yourself. Do you just trust any Joe Schmo off the street? No, you trust those people that you've built connections with. It's built in consistency, in the way that you greet your kids in the morning, in the way that you respond when things get hard, in the way that you follow through, you show interest in them, in the way that you stay steady when they can't, you stay calm and regulated when they can't. It's in the small, ordinary moments that slowly tell a student, you're safe here and I'm not going anywhere. And looking back, some of the most meaningful progress that I saw this year didn't come from a strategy or a system. It truly came from the relationships that we built with our students. And I say we because it's not just me in that classroom. It's also my incredible instructional assistants. One of the biggest shifts in my thinking this year, I think, like reflecting back, has definitely been what progress actually looks like. I know it doesn't always show up in the ways that people expect it to. And sometimes progress is a student independently asking for a break before they escalate. Or sometimes it's bouncing back more quickly after a tough moment. Sometimes it's tolerating disappointment without shutting down. Sometimes it's joining a group activity even when it feels uncomfortable. Sometimes it's trying again when everything in them wants to just stop. And sometimes it's repairing a moment that just didn't go well. I have a story. Just now, before I left school today, my teacher friend came up to me and told me that one of my students went to the water fountain. She had a very hard time at the water fountain trying to refill her water bottle. It was a whole scene. The water spilled everywhere. This student at the beginning of the year would have had a meltdown. I would have been getting a call that I need to come help her, and she would need to be brought back to the classroom. When this happened at the water fountain, not only did she not melt down, she thought, who can I go to for help? She went to that trusted teacher that is my friend, so she's familiar with her. Again, someone that she has built trust with, built a relationship with. My friend comes into the classroom all the time. She went to my friend's classroom and said, hey, I need help. Like, this is what happened. She was not melting down. She was not upset. She was not crying. She was just very matter of fact. This would have never, ever, ever happened in the beginning of the year. And then she was able to get help, by the way, and problem was solved. And by the way, when she came back to my classroom, I had no idea this happened because she came back so calm, cool, collected and rejoined the class. This would have never happened at the beginning of the year. She has learned so many social skills this year to help her in that moment. We did a whole unit on asking for help. We did a whole unit on advocating for ourselves. Speaking up for ourselves, staying calm in a tough moment. Like, the butterflies I have inside of me because this happened, I have the chills. Like, I'm so proud of her. And this student in particular has come such a long way. And this is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about when I say progress does not always look the same for all of our students, especially in a setting like this. Sometimes progress looks different. Yeah, she probably made academic gains. Yeah, there's gains in other areas, but truly that SEL piece, that social, emotional, behavioral piece has grown so much. And spoiler alert, now she's going to be able to take these skills that she has learned in our classroom beyond our classroom. She already is. And how special is that? And while these things might not always be reflected in traditional data or assessments, they are absolutely progress. Sometimes even the most important kind of progress. And this year has made me so much more intentional about noticing and celebrating those wins when they happen. And let me tell you, they've happened a lot this year, so I'm a happy teacher. There were so many moments this year where I watched students grow in ways that were honestly powerful to witness. I saw students step into leadership in ways that they hadn't before. I saw students become trusted helpers within the classroom and beyond the classroom. I saw students begin to advocate for themselves, like I just said, in ways that are new and emerging for them. And I saw students do things that at different points in time may not have been expected of them by other people, especially myself. But they did them anyway. And that's one of the most rewarding parts of this work, getting to see my students not just learn, but grow into themselves in real time. And that's one of my favorite things. And this year definitely changed me too. I think that every classroom changes you a little bit. I think every year changes you a little bit, whether you realize it in the moment or not. And this one definitely did. It reminded me to slow down and actually see what's happening underneath the behaviors instead of just on the surface. It reminded me to stay curious instead of reactive. It reminded me that flexibility is not a backup plan. It's often the plan and something we should follow and live by all the time. And more than anything, it brought me back to that core of why I just love special education and self-contained classrooms in the first place. To build relationships that matter, to meet my students where they are, and to notice progress that might otherwise be overlooked. And lastly, to help my students see strengths in themselves that they are still discovering, which is one of my favorite things. So as I head in to my last week of school, I've already started thinking about next year, of course, what I want to refine, what I want to strengthen, and what I want to try a little bit differently. But I've also been thinking about what I want to carry forward without changing too much of it at all. Things like building those relationships, having the flexibility, the individualized support systems, and the overall feel of the classroom that I had this year. Because when I think back on this year, those are the things that stand out the most. Not the paperwork or the stress or the hard moments or all of those annoying meetings that could have been emails. It's the kids. It's always the kids. And what a fun, awesome year we had. So if I had to put my first year teaching ERI into one idea, it would be this. A year ago, I understood it in theory, but now I get to understand it in practice. And in practice, it looks like resilience for myself, my instructional assistants, my students. It looks like relationships. It looks like flexibility in real time. It looks like celebrating growth that might otherwise be unnoticed or overlooked. And it looks like meeting my students exactly where they are, which is my favorite thing to do, and walking forward with them one step at a time from there. This year reminded me why I love special education, like I said, and I feel incredibly grateful to have spent this year with these students. So thank you so much for listening. If you have any reflections on your year, I would love to hear it. I am so excited because starting next week, we are going to have guests on the podcast. I am doing a little summer series where I will have guests of all different teaching backgrounds, occupational therapists, maybe speech therapists, behaviorists, counselors, teachers, maybe even parents, whoever I can gather. I'm going to have some guests, and I hope you stick around to listen, even though it's the summer. Have an awesome day, and I will see you guys later.